Okay.
Oh, are you having some? Yeah.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Welcome everybody who's joining. Welcome. 46 people, yay, keep coming in. We'll just give it a minute for everybody to arrive. Hey Des. Look at all those beautiful faces. Too many faces to see them all. Kia ora, Karen. Welcome everybody. 51. We'll just give it a couple more minutes, or not actually 1 minute. We're going to give it 1 more minute. How are we looking? Okay, I'm gonna call it and kick this beautiful thing off. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Liana, ko Liana toko ingoa. For better or worse, some of you have seen my face, and I'm your mistress of ceremonies today, ably helped by the lovely Susie behind me. Just checking we're all in the right workshop, the Zero Waste Network Behaviour Change Workshop. Yay. And we've got Daughter and Ali and Issy behind the scenes pushing all the buttons. But I'm sure we'll all be very forgiving to each other when the inevitable thing does a bit of a crazy blip. And so now, look, great, the numbers are still going up. But I think I'm going to formally start this. And because it's Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, we've got a little whakatauki to start us off here, a little thought for the day. Forgive me if my pronunciation is not so great, but you can help me out. So I picked this one because it's under a heading of mahitahi, about collaboration, and because this very bird that's in the whakatauki was outside my bedroom window this morning. So it goes, I hea koe I te tangihanga o te riroriro, and that's about where were you when the grey warbler was singing, because it's about sometimes in these seasons of our work, there's a time when the jobs need to be done, and sometimes people come along later and want all the beautiful fruit from planting that garden or doing all that hard work in the spring. But luckily, the 59 people that are now on this call, we count you as the ones that did turn up when the grey warbler was singing. So the purpose of today's session is really to focus our minds on this whole big world of behaviour change. And we're not going to be able to finish it, but we are going to make a fantastic start. And we've got a great speaker to kick us off. And then we're going to do some talking through some options. So there'll be a little bit of interactions, a couple of polls, and hopefully a chance for some people to speak. And we'll just muddle through, but some of you may know that there is both the view at the top right hand of your screen, where you can see in gallery and you can see who else is here, the chat, which we will also use, and it's great that people have already got some comments in the chat. And also there should be a little hands up facility that you can use. And if you can flick your way through all the little bits of menus on your screen, the hands up signal, we'll be doing our best in the team behind the scenes to check who's actually got their hand up, and we'll try and offer you the chance to speak. So hands up, all the chat, go ahead and use it, and the team will try and take notice. Look, if we do miss somebody, don't worry. I hope you've seen we're recording the session, and we'll also save the chat, and so we'll be able to go back and just check through that we didn't miss anybody out. So thank you so much. So I'd just like now to hand over to Daughter, who you all know and love, and she's going to introduce our gorgeous keynote speaker.
Thanks, Liana. So we've got Michaela here. Michaela works for Kogo, but a nice story is how I met Michaela, which was thanks to Izzy's great organisation of our Closing the Loop events. So she organised an event down in Christchurch, and I went down to attend that, and Michaela was there and came up, and we had a really great conversation about, of all things, our theses, which were both on zero waste. So I've kept in touch with Michaela over the last kind of year and a half, and I'm super stoked that she's able to join us. She has a more formal bio, which I'm going to read to you now. So Michaela is Kogo's Business Impact Manager. With a master's degree from the University of Canterbury, her passion lies in promoting conscious consumption and alternative lifestyles, including zero waste, which she did her primary research in. Michaela's thesis followed zero waste consumption, her ultimate goal of identifying how one becomes a zero waste consumer, the motivators, barriers, and facilitators faced during their journey. Her focus now at Kogo is exploring how to positively nudge consumers to shop sustainably and exploring the carbon footprint space. So welcome, Michaela. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Kia ora tātou whānau. I will just present my screen now. So just let me know if you can see it.
Yes.
All good? Perfect. So I might just minimize that. There we go. Yeah, so I'm going to be taking you all through my thesis, which was in Masters of Commerce in marketing down in Otatahi, and I am based in Wellington now. So yeah, we'll just run through it, and then I think we've got time for questions at the end. So if you guys have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free just to jot them down, and then I can try my best answering them at the end. And also happy to give out my email as well to get in touch with any of you guys post this hui. So yeah, let's get started. Awesome. So I've just done a bit of an overview. So this presentation is specifically focusing on my thesis, and we're going to touch on background, why I was motivated and incentivized to kind of study this topic, and then identifying some alternative consumption identities, identifying the gap in knowledge, my research method findings, the barriers and facilitators, and then the whole thing, which I did, I guess the thesis for, was identifying what a zero waste journey looks like, and then identifying that framework, which then can be applied for future studies to actually use as kind of a behavioral change method. So yeah, let's get going. Cool. So a bit of background why I kind of was interested and started learning specifically about zero waste was in our masters. We were able to kind of choose absolutely anything, which was awesome, and I decided to focus on sustainable marketing. And then I kind of identified, which I'll go in more depth in the gap in knowledge, that there was a real lack of understanding, especially in academia, around zero waste consumers. So I decided to purely focus my thesis on that. And I really loved this quote, and I started the thesis off with this. You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. And yeah, I think that is very true when it comes to consumption and when it comes to the end consumers as well. And so here are a few of my citations, which just provide a little bit of background, showing that the sustainability trend has really increased over the past decade, and specifically alternative consumption identities as well. So we've got sustainability has seen an increased prominence in society and in business with the expansion in academia, specifically marketing. And now more than ever, consumers have begun adapting to sustainable consumption practices and changing their lifestyles to become more environmentally conscious. And there is a growing interest in sustainable marketing, specifically how consumers are adopting sustainable lifestyles and sustainable purchase behaviors. Cool. So I'm going to go on to my alternative consumption identities. So I guess an important thing just to highlight before we jump into this is that I'm specifically, well, my research is specifically focusing on consumers, and I'm sure everyone on this call is well aware that big corporations are really, I guess, negatively impacting our environment. But unfortunately, because we live in a capitalist society, it is, very, very hard to change those big players. And so I was really focusing on how individual consumption collectively can make a big difference. So these were a few of my identities or community groups which I researched and went into quite a bit more detail in my thesis. So yeah, feel free, my thesis has been shared with Daughter, so feel free to have a bit of a deep dive if you guys want to learn a little bit more. So first, my zero waste consumers, and I actually was referencing the Zero Waste Network, which was, pretty awesome. And then we've got collaborative consumption, responsible consumption, ethical consumption, conscious consumption, and minimalism. And there are plenty more identities as well. And my thesis was published in start of 2020. So over the last year, there's been a lot more that's come to light as well. Cool. And so I'll just identify the gap in the knowledge and what my thesis tried to fill within the academia. And I really, really was doing a bit of a deep dive of zero waste, and it was very clear, specifically in academia and perhaps in business as well, that the term zero waste was mainly used as a form of production, and it wasn't really looked at through a consumption lens. So I highlighted that there was a failure to highlight how zero waste consumers live. And so when I was looking at my studies worldwide, there was a real lack in identifying your average zero waste consumer. And yeah, Daughter was doing her thesis at the same time as me, and our topics are kind of similar. But yeah, so that was really cool to connect with her as well. And so what I decided to focus on was the zero waste consumers. So how one becomes a zero waste consumer, what are the motivators, and what are the barriers and facilitators. So really looking at that ground level and breaking it down. I really wanted my thesis to kind of be the very start of the work in zero waste academia, because there was not there was hardly any there already. So really using it as something which then others can build on. Cool. So my research method, so I did ethnography, and I also did interviews as well. And I'm pretty sure Liam and Hannah are on this call. I did interview Liam. So ethnography is studying online communities. And we also are still publishing a journal article of zero waste consumers in New Zealand specifically. And I did interview, I would say probably about a dozen around New Zealand. And so that's going to be New Zealand focused, and then my thesis was worldwide. So the benefits of ethnography and why we wanted to study an online community is, so firstly, I could collect a wide and large amount of data in quite an efficient manner, because I only had a year and a half to do my thesis, and it was longitudinal data as well. So when I go to my next slide highlighting my participants, it will show the length that they were doing the video diaries. Immediate transcription, which was absolutely amazing. I think I ended up watching around 800 to 1,000 hours of YouTube videos for my participants. And at the start, I was super excited because I was like, heck yeah, YouTube, this is going to be awesome. But yeah, after that 500 mark, I was a bit over it, that's for sure. And yeah, it was entirely unobstructive. So we were thinking about doing focus groups and did interviews as well, but that was for an article, not my thesis. And obviously there is some unconscious bias there from the interviewer, and interviewers can accidentally lead participants down a path, which I guess they are kind of wanting. So yeah, that was just great. And then also my participants were able to be scattered worldwide, and that they were, which was, yeah, really exciting. So my participants, so as I said, I focused on YouTube and I had a set criteria for what type of participants I wanted. We focused on 3 because I had to watch so many videos. It just was a little bit not manageable if we were going to be focusing on more. And so these are pseudonyms, and we've got Alex, Sarah, and Bex. And as you can see, I was watching about a decade of Alex's journey, starting from 2010, very similar with Sarah and Bex as well. And we've got them from the US, Canada, and UK. And yeah, feel free to dive into my thesis if you want to have a look at the specific criteria that we focused on as well. We really wanted them to have quite a large community. So that is really shown in the total views, as we've got Alex has got over 16 million, and Bex and Sarah very similar as well. Cool. And so yeah, kind of diving into my findings now. So what I did was I did a thematic analysis, and I pulled out key quotes from all of my participants, and then kind of identified key themes, which I will talk through the next couple of slides. But I thought it would be best just to highlight what zero waste means to each of their participants, as I'm sure most of us on the call, it means something different to all of us as well. The same as what sustainability means, right? It is a big umbrella term, and yeah, just figuring out what works best with us and what we connect with. So Sarah, I think zero waste isn't like any one end goal. It's a way of living. It's not the idea of having 0 items in a trash jar and having this perfectly curated Instagram feed. It's about just being here and being responsible with our choices and using what we have, questioning the way things are done, questioning business, and getting the word out. And Bex said zero waste is about reducing our ecological footprint. When you opt for a more sustainable lifestyle like zero waste, you make the commitment to lessen your footprint on our planet, environmentally speaking, and opt for more sustainable options. And then Alex, she really believed that zero waste was meant for businesses, and she goes on to talk about Walmart as a specific example, but I've just cut that out here because it was super long. So the term zero waste was meant to be used for businesses. As us as consumers have the choice every single time we spend our money with dollars, whether or not we want to support said business because of what practices they are using. So we go on to the findings now. And now, sorry for these kind of like, it's a bit academic jargony, but my supervisor was very keen on making sure the themes have beautiful academic names. So we kind of start, and this is in chronological order as well. I started identifying what themes were coming out of these consumers' journey. And now bear in mind, this was me looking at their 10-year journey in zero waste. And that obviously came with highs and lows. It came with them changing environments, going in and out of relationships. And yeah, it was really interesting to see how their lifestyle was both at the forefront and then had to be left behind in places as well. So my first theme that I identified was pilgrim. And so this related to the journey that is adapted to self-actualizing within their zero waste lifestyle. And so underneath this, I've got intrepid explorers, self-determination, and peak experiences. And now all of this is in a lot more detailed in my thesis as well. So feel free to have a read over that, because I understand it is very jargony. But I will highlight this more when we get to the framework as well. And then we've got catalyst. So my participants acted as a catalyst for change, for new people coming to their channels and say perhaps they're a bit curious with the zero waste lifestyle, they don't know where to start, and also as a resource for others as well, because I'm sure a few of us know that it is quite tricky to navigate the lifestyle, and so being able to point in the direction of, hey, check out these videos or check out this person, they're quite knowledgeable, that was really proved quite prominent throughout all of the participants' journeys. And then the third one is human, for a lack of better word. And so that was just really highlighting that relapsing and making mistakes is all part of the lifestyle. And I thought there were some really, the two key sub themes that I really loved was evangelist and realist. And I'm sure I can speak for myself on this one, that when starting a conscious consumption lifestyle, I was very much evangelizing those around me and my friends in whānau, just saying, come on the journey, like why don't you want to, and then quickly identifying that that doesn't work, and it's just very tiring, to say the least. And it was very clear that the participants went through that as well, especially in the early parts of their journey. And then switching over to realist, actually identifying, hey, look, this lifestyle works for me, but it may not work for others. Power distance, this was really interesting and really related to the social paradigms as well. So a power distance measures how a culture perceives power relationships between people. And so again, we've got two contrasting sub-themes, and that is elitist and egalitarian. And now that's quite similar to human, as they're both two different sides of the coin. And it was quite interesting as well. I thought that elitist and evangelist really worked together, as when the participants were kind of starting their journey, they were very much on kind of the thought wave that we need to have all of these specific zero waste products. If you don't have this, then like you're not a proper zero waster. And then as they started, I guess, got further along on the journey, they realized that was not true at all. That was just a wee marketing tactic, which they fell for and got very excited when they first came to the lifestyle. And then they transitioned into a more egalitarian role and really welcoming everyone that came to the lifestyle. And then lastly, I've got my social paradigms. And so that was identifying the type of paradigms that the participants interact with. So we've got the dominant social paradigm, and now that's the paradigm that we all interact with in this common day. So capitalism. And then the new environmental paradigm, and that is putting environmentalism at the forefront. And again, I go into more detail in that in my thesis, but it was really interesting watching the participants battle between the two. So this is just a little bit of coding of these themes here. And so I kind of was just, figuring out what goes where, and this is what I ended up coming up with, and I'm pretty happy with that. And then if we go to my barriers and facilitators, so this was my second and third research question, and I identified what the barriers were for these zero waste consumers and what the facilitators were as well. So I identified 3 types of barriers, and they are shown on the framework on the next slide as well. Firstly, we've got barriers to entry, and that's zero waste influencers, social media, misconceptions, and greenwashing. And I'm sure a few of us have encountered those for sure, especially I can think of my own journey, looking on social media, trying to get inspiration, and just finding that perfectly curated feed of just zero waste jars and all the products and all the silverware, and thinking, oh goodness, that's definitely not me. And then we've got barriers to acclimatizing. So that's kind of in the middle of your journey. And those are feelings of overwhelming, changing habits, and then managing those trade-offs. And then we've got barriers to progression. And so those are communication styles, commitment issues, and changing environments. And I really found that changing environments was quite prominent in a few of my participants. One of them moved states, and she was really, really struggling to move into a new apartment and purchase everything, I guess, secondhand, or follow her zero waste lifestyle and live those values. So I thought that was, quite interesting. And then my facilitators, we got we have I identified access, outreach, and privilege. So obviously access, when you have the zero waste shops and the products around you and you are catered for, that is a huge facilitator within your lifestyle. Outreach may not be as applicable for our everyday consumer, but sure was for my participants, as they had a really big social media following, and they were then able to communicate what's worked with them and what hasn't worked with them, and shared that with their community. And also on the flip side, they were really held accountable when they were saying, hey, look, I am zero waste, I'm going to take you along on my day and let's see what I do. And then also privilege, I thought was a really interesting one as well, so I really dived deep into my thesis. I think that is very, very interesting. Cool. And then we go on to my framework. So now that I've kind of I guess identified the definitions of these little buzzwords, I produced this zero waste journey framework. And so this is kind of a loop. I like to think of it as a loop. And this is, where it begins. So first we've got pilgrim. So as we were touching on just before, really highlighting the interest and exploring what works with them. And then we've got our first barrier, and that's barriers to entry, and that's the first withdrawal. And so if we go back to the other slide, that was things like social media and greenwashing. And then firstly, we've got our motivators and facilitators. So we've got power distance, the catalyst, social paradigms, and also the outreach. And then our second barrier is barriers to acclimatizing. And that is also leads to withdrawal for some following this lifestyle. And then we've got more facilitators, and that is access and privilege, what we just touched on. And then lastly, we have our barriers to progression, and then that is another withdrawal. And then our last motivator is human, and again, realizing that we all make mistakes and just really tailoring the lifestyle to the individual. And then we loop back around and practically start again. And that was the framework that I created. And it was just I really tried to highlight what a journey looks like, where the barriers are, what these barriers do for the everyday consumer, where consumers withdrawal, and then just really focusing on building this as kind of a backbone for further studies to do more mahi with. So if I go to future work, that's really it. And what I ideally wanted from their framework is to then following the study, future studies can incorporate the framework into behavioral change intervention. And so the framework can be used as a tool when navigating consumers' journey or interest in the lifestyle. And then research can be conducted on how this framework alters behavior and whether it benefits consumers to be more aware of the upcoming barriers they are predicted to face. And then lastly, the framework can be applied to other alternative consumption lifestyles, such as ethical consumers, voluntary simplifiers we didn't touch on, or minimalists or so forth. But so that is my thesis. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will stop sharing now. And just let me know if you have any questions, or I think we've got around like 10 minutes or something for questions.
Hey, Michaela. Thank you so much, ngā mihi nui from all of us. Brilliant. And so, look, thank goodness you're the one doing the PhD, because my brain would explode if I had to do that. But there's something in there, isn't there, about really diving into where people are at and noticing that first without any preconceptions. That's one thing I heard. Obviously, that new word, netnography, love it. Never heard of that before. So really starting where the people are at, and then thinking about that journey, that sort of progression through the stages that they're going to go through. understanding the barriers. And
Mm.
that's really the thing, that method, if you get what I mean, that way of thinking is what's going to help us guide people down that journey. Is that really what you're saying is the message for us here?
Yeah, definitely. And I just think also just identifying that everyone's journey is different, and what works for you may not work for others, and just also realizing that we are human and we can only, I guess, do as much as possible in the current society that we live in. So there will be knocks, and there will be times where perhaps you can't opt for more sustainable options or products that are aligned with your values and beliefs. But yeah, at the end of the day, you just got to try as much as you can. And that was, very, very prevalent in 10 years of watching consumers' journeys.
So I'm going to open it up for questions for everybody. I just see in the chat that someone's saying they'd love to read the thesis. The link's in the chat, and the link for Michaela's slides is going to come up at some people, and some people want to read your thesis. So maybe they're the ones in lockdown. No, not being rude. So any questions, anybody? Daughter, have you got your hand up?
I do. I can't figure out how to put my hand up. So I'll
okay. If everybody looks down at the bottom of their screen, there's a little smiley face called reactions. And if you click on that, it gives you the option to raise your hand underneath. But go on, daughter, if you've got a question.
I do have a question. Yeah. So yesterday we talked about a theory of change that the Zero Waste Network has developed, and it really puts kind of a way of thinking about all the different things that need to happen to create a zero waste Aotearoa. And actions and behaviours is kind of one of the first things, the easiest things to kind of get into. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are on in terms of how that connects with the other things that we know that we need in terms of making businesses that are making good choices, getting involved in political decisions, and just kind of generally building a kind of a culture of zero waste. Like, what is the connection between these kind of individual actions and these kind of other ways that things that need to happen?
Yeah, great question. I think, that's something which is just ever evolving, I would say. And also, I guess what I really found that when there's a sense of community, that really was proving as a huge motivation for the participants. And when they found that they were not the only ones that were perhaps undertaking this lifestyle change, and that businesses and policy and governments and things at large were supporting them, then that motivated them even further. They were like, awesome, right, I am making these changes for myself, but people are listening. So I guess, just really that sense of community, I think, is really huge, and can make a really big difference along individual journeys.
So what I hear there, Michaela, is that sort of whole socialization is really important.
Definitely.
That looking around and seeing, oh, there's someone like me, that's going to be a real influencer on people's behaviour. Yeah, and there's some lovely comments. Sue saying that she's recognising herself in those stages, that we probably are all doing that. Oh, where am I? Evangelist. Yeah, exactly. So are there any other questions, anybody? Oh, Elena, you've got your hand up. Do you want to go for it?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Yeah, I figured out how to raise my hand. Hi, Michaela, thank you so much. And I am looking forward to reading your thesis, and I am in lockdown, but this is not connected. And yeah, I'm just wondering really from a personal perspective, what are your personal thoughts on this? How do you talk to other people and without sounding patronizing? I want to spread the word. I want to bring this up as much as I can. But first of all, I feel like I annoy people. And second of all, I don't want, to push them away from this. So, is the solution to just lead by example silently, or like what to do?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I've definitely struggled with that at the start of my journey as well. And I think personally, what works best with me and what I've seen now being on, I guess, a conscious consumption journey for about 5 or so years now, is acting like a role model is just the best way to do it. And at the start, it is really hard to kind of just watch but I just watch their behaviors and be like, oh, if I were you, I would not be doing that. But unfortunately, I think humans are very stubborn, right? And we don't want to be told that we're doing something wrong and that, you know, there is a better way of doing something. But you'll get those small pockets and I guess those peak experiences that I identified when a few of my friends started coming to me and being like, oh, why do you do that? Or like I'd be out and like I would have my own cup, or like I'd have, you know, very little simple things like that, and I'd just think, oh yeah, cool, I'm going to start doing that as well. And they kind of start mimicking my behavior. And that's where I was like, oh, awesome, okay, this is really making some change. But I guess, yeah, you just have to be patient and lead by example, because although we are stubborn, we're curious as well. And if someone is doing something differently, they're going to look and maybe question, hey, why are you doing that? And then that's your time to be like, okay, let me tell you why I'm doing this. But yeah, it's really tricky, and I definitely appreciate that as well. But it is those small pockets when you find that people are curious and then change their behavior. That's, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Cool, thank you.
No worries, great question.
Liana, you are on mute.
Oh, I clicked the button, but I didn't click it hard enough. Great question, Elena. So let's get a little bit of engagement going for everybody. So we're going to do a poll in a second. So listen up to what some of the questions are. And daughter, maybe you could whack that slide up. So a really crude way of talking about the journey of, we've talked about the journey of becoming a zero waste consumer. But I guess we were wondering what our journey is, all of us on this call. I know some of you are from the network and some of you might be outside the network, but you're our close friends. Think about your journey of using this behavior change way of thinking. This way of, you know, the things I talked about, really starting with where the people are at, understanding their sort of typology, their journey, the context that they're in, understanding the barriers at different points. And at that point, that helps you design those really great interventions that use that kind of peer group pressure. So if we said that's a journey that we are all on, is using these behavior change tools, where are you on the spectrum on this slide? This is just a really kind of rough as way of describing some stages that we might go through. They're not necessarily linear. So it might be that you're at the beginning, so to speak. You've just become aware of this whole world of behavior change thinking. It might be that you're actually going, right, I'm aware of it now. Now I'm going to get some more knowledge. I really am going to read that thesis because I want to build up my knowledge on it. Then you might be at the stage where you're thinking, yeah, how could I use this in my work? I wonder what relevance it might have for me. How could I figure this out? Then you might be at the point now where you actually really want to do this. Some of you may already be doing it. You're at the action point. Some of you may have been doing it, but you're struggling to keep using it, or you're in that stage of getting to some point of maintenance. And right at the other end of the thing, you're kind of like a little bit of an artist or a master or mistress of it now. You're honing how you use this. So everybody, the poll's going to get launched very soon. You're thinking about, in your own work, doesn't matter whether it's you or your organization, about where are you at on a spectrum of using behavior change thinking. Are you just becoming aware of it, or are you right at the other end of a grandmaster, or somewhere in between? Now, don't worry about the technicalities of the poll. He's not going to get it right or wrong. This is not a vote. It's just a temperature take. Let's have a feel for all 87 people that are on this call about where you're at. So go for it. Submit an answer and we'll see what pops up. I'll play some background music. How's it going, Izzy? Have we got any results yet? Are people still clicking and thinking?
There's still a few more votes coming in.
That's it, folks. Yeah, and then I'm going to just, I'd love to hear a few little stories about where people are at different ends of the spectrum. I see, Gina, you're on the call, aren't you? I might come to you. Maybe you're at one end of the spectrum, but I also would really love to hear from somebody who has no idea what we're talking about and is just really right back at the, I want more knowledge or whatever. Great, here's some results. Fantastic. So about half of us are already in the doing. And there's a good sort of rump of us, sorry to call you a rump, there's a lovely bunch of people who would consider themselves that they're honing it, that they're really in that kind of learning through doing, and quite a few back here in this 11% of knowledge and intention. So that's great. It's almost a nice little bell curve tending towards the more experienced end. Fantastic. So yeah, I would just love to hear if anybody is willing to say from the beginner end or from the I'm just even thinking about it end, is there anyone out there who's brave enough to just kind of describe, oh yeah, where am I at? This is what it's like for me. Otherwise, I might just pick someone. Anyone want to put their hand up who's right from at the contemplating, beginning, wanting to get more information end?
Adrian has got his hand up.
Go for it, Adrian.
Yeah, I selected multiple. I selected multiple options because I'm not. Yeah, I think it depends which aspect you're talking about, but yeah,
So here's a question for you, Adrian.
Yeah.
What if we take that same thinking? What's the barrier to you being able to use behavior change thinking more in your work?
Yeah, I certainly struggle a lot with peer pressure. So one thing that's top of mind is I've got family who are very into giving gifts, and well, I'll certainly enjoy the gifts since I'm being given them anyways. I'm not that keen on receiving. Yes.
Yeah, it's a real big taboo, isn't it? Almost like to not receive koha or not want to give it back. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Thank you for your honesty, Adrian. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Hey, Gina,
Yeah,
can I call on you, Gina, just to get? Oh, sorry, Adrian. Say finish up, and then we'll go.
At the same time, I do have experience on the other end trying to push for behavior change. Thing I know best there is computing.
Yeah.
That's my profession, and
yeah, so you probably would be a very good netographer, Adrian. Hey, look, I'm going to move on now and go to Gina, and then I think Kat, you've got your hand up. So Gina, do you want to say something from your experience?
Oh, I don't know what to say. I guess I love, Michaela, the journey that you put up there, and everything that everybody said. It's not about being perfect. It's taking a long-term view. So it's being where people are at, not being too far ahead of them, and always trying to be the solution. So instead of, there's nothing like somebody telling you to do something to make you run in the other direction. So I guess we've always taken the approach at Wastebusters that it's about making it fun, making it something that somebody wants to participate in, making it a positive story, and always being conscious that the system makes it really, really difficult to be a zero waste consumer. And I was really interested in your thesis, Michaela, that those people were all influencers. And I thought about the people I know in my life that I would actually call a zero waste consumer, and they're all influencers in their own way, Hannah and Liam, Wave and Matthew. And actually to be a zero waste consumer in a normal life is almost impossible. And so I think that's really good for us to be conscious of, that, everyone's on the journey, but we need to change the landscape before the journey can really be successful, unless that's really the only thing Wave and Hannah and everybody, it's not the only thing you're doing, but you're so extremely passionate that that's the, you know, the headspace that you're in. And for other people, that's probably not achievable. So it's about being conscious that that's not a fault of the person, that's really a fault of the system. And
hey, Peter, that little slogan of change the landscape maybe fits back to Daughter's question. You know, we can be doing the stuff targeted at the individual consumer, but we also maybe need to be doing that stuff that's targeted at changing the landscape that their journey's going to go on, that they maybe have to go together.
Exactly. And it's also about making people realize they're not an individual, that they can be part of the change of landscape. So it is about making people feel empowered to that even if their behaviour is not perfect, just by caring and participating, they will change the landscape that makes it more possible to get closer to zero waste.
Great. Hey, Kat, what do you think? Where are you? I can see you. You've got your
Hi. Yeah, this has been I've been on this journey for years and years and years. And I have small children and they are my advocates. So we don't have presents in our house, or everything's made or everything's secondhand, and it is a journey. And we have an approach with other people. We like to be leaders. But if we recognize somebody isn't doing something, I know, or there could be improvements somewhere, we look at the positive. Okay, what is this person doing that's amazing? Let's start with a positive conversation. Don't just go in there and tell them off. Start with the positive side, and then it's sort of, okay, this is how we do it. And then getting a feel for how they would feel about doing that. And if they've got some challenges, well, that's an opportunity to learn. And this journey and living in a sustainable lifestyle should be easy. So if somebody's got a challenge, that's an opportunity to learn that there's a challenge. And okay, how can we make some changes here? Can we write a letter to the business that's causing these challenges? What else can we do? This should be easy. It should be making our lifestyles easier.
I love that, Kat. And not being judgmental.
Yeah.
So I can hear an echo on my call. Has anyone else got that problem? Just check in.
I've just muted Kat. I think it's the combo of you and Kat.
Okay, fantastic. So what I want to do now is just that question that I asked before is thinking, we're all part of, whether we're a formal part of the Zero Waste Network or the wide, I see there's quite a few people here from Environment Hubs. There's a whole range of people on this call. We could be using each other more, I guess is the premise of this call, to be able to collectively go on this journey. And so I guess that's what we really want to focus our thoughts on now, is what do we need? Assuming we think behaviour change is a really useful tool in our kete, what could we do together to be able to go on that journey together, to be able to use these tools? You know, just like Kat was saying, the positive reinforcement about small little micro changes can be a great technique. Or maybe even we need like one big campaign that says you only have to be human to be zero waste. And we actually make a campaign that focuses on all those little quirky, guilty things that you happen, because that's the meta message that would help more people get on the bus, so to speak. And maybe that's something you can't just do in Wanaka, or you can't just do in one place. It needs a bigger groundswell. So, hey, that's not for me to answer, but I'd love you to be thinking about that right now, is what do you need? And Daughter, of course, has already prepared some beautiful half-baked cakes for us, like the best cooking shows, because, of course, she's had her ears and eyes to the ground already about some of the ideas that have been coming up in the networks that we're in. And she's just going to share those for a minute so that we can debate them a little bit. So, Daughter, do you want to just talk us through? There's 4 big ideas. It's pretty simple.
Yes, totally. Okay, so really just acknowledging, like Liana already has, is that there is people who aren't part of the network, and these are really network focused, but just an offer there that if anybody isn't part of the network and is interested in what we're doing, then feel free to get in touch with me. So the first one is about, and also just to say that there are some other people on the call, like Sue, Gina, if you want to jump in at any point, I would be very happy for you to do that, because some of these ideas are your ideas. So the first one is to develop a joint behaviour change program or project. The idea there is that Lots of our members are doing amazing educational projects, or really incorporating behaviour change theory into the way that they're working, but that they're often trying to find money to do those things from the same places. So really the question there is would there be benefit in coordinating that a bit more, collaborating on a funding application? I think that the really big questions are around, well, what would we need to focus on? What is the kind of fundamental element or key issues that it would make sense to work on together, and find those kind of efficiencies and effectiveness. But I also think it's really important to acknowledge that we still want things that are going to work locally, and really acknowledging the way that so many of these community enterprises work is really putting their local needs right at the heart of their projects. So wanting to maintain that balance. The next one is improving our collective storytelling. Just building on the idea of building a zero waste culture as part of that idea of creating systems change, storytelling is a key part of that. And as a network, we have the potential to kind of do two-way communication. So I've got a little spectrum there of members. You guys are all out in the world doing amazing things. You also belong to the Zero Waste Network. And we do some communications, and then there's all this stuff happening at a government level and kind of issues all the time coming out that we could be influencing, and that have influence on both the network's activities and kind of locally at a membership level. So there is potential there to probably improve the way that we're hearing from local members and about local issues, and feeding those really local examples up into bigger conversations, but also maybe responding to stuff that we know is happening locally but is connected to big issues. So some examples are around long-term planning projects, processes within councils. Is there a way that the network could be supporting members to be telling a really coherent story about some of the issues that we think are true for the whole country, and in regard to zero waste? The third is related, I think, to that storytelling, but is maybe about, and I really struggled to come up with the words for this, and I've gone with develop a strong zero waste brand, but I'm not entirely convinced that's what we're talking about. I think it's really about the perception of zero waste as a normal and important way of being, that we need to have increased kind of visibility of that idea, and would collaborating on that, and I've called it a brand, but like I said, I don't necessarily think it's just about a visual identity. I think it's also about potentially standards and acknowledging that you are part of a movement when you are talking to people locally. And I think it's maybe useful to talk about two examples here. One is that Matthew Luxon shared yesterday that Localised has been successful in getting a contract to develop these. They're going to be hubs in Auckland, and what is the opportunity to how should they be signed? What name should be on the building? And then I talked to Jackie Forbes from Parakore, and she was just telling us how hard they go on the Parakore marae. So it's very obvious when you go to a marae that belongs to Parakore, and is there potential for us to kind of collectively do something about that? And last but not least is maybe more of a process rather than an actual activity. It might be the thing that we do first, and then it's the way that we do the other things that we decide. But Wasteman's has a thing called sector groups, and we've talked about for a long time whether it would be useful to have a behaviour change working group or sector group. The model that Wasteman's use is that it's volunteers from the membership, but there is admin support from Wasteman. So Zero Waste Network could do something similar. We could delegate decision making and actually doing the work to a group, which I think is a good way of making sure that it's You know, it's not just the Zero Waste Network team, it's got a wider appeal. But yeah, there's some pros and cons of that. So those are the 4 ideas. Shall I stop share, Liana?
Yeah, thank you. So look, I know that's a lot to take in, but what I'd love us to do is just go through each of those ideas kind of a little bit slowly, just give them each a few minutes, so that we can gather up particular responses, pros or cons, and or any comments that anybody wants to make about each one, so we can sort of rummage around in them. Now, what we're doing now is not necessarily deciding that we will definitely do those. We're introducing these options, and we're trying to get a bit of a temperature take on them, and then we're going to say, look, who wants to join us in these conversations about if we should do any of these? So this is my warning that at the end we will ask for names, or people are saying, yep, I want to put my name down to be part of a particular discussion that might start up. Of course, you do not have to sell your firstborn to this. We're not deciding. I guess what we're saying is that we want to create a bus that we could get on to start to progress this work together, and this is our opportunity to kickstart it. So if we could come back to your list, daughter, and just go back to the first one, which I think was really about saying, could we do a joint project? Is that right? And I don't know whether you've got a slide for that one.
So yes. So you want me to share the slide again? It was
just the first one, yeah.
Okay.
So don't have it pinned, just put it up there so we can refer to it. And I'd like to just open the comments or any hands up generally about saying whether we think you know, what it might take to do this, so this is like the input end. Gosh, what would we need to do if we wanted to do this? And all the way the other end might be, and why would it be cool? What could it really give us? What might be the result? Karen, can I call on you here? I see you've put something in the comments around love food, hate waste as being a sort of an example of this one, maybe. Do you want to say anything here?
Yeah, just that's, I'm not saying it's necessarily a great example. I think it is good personally, but it was being developed over a long term, and it was backed by a lot of research into getting the data from around the country, and it was run through a wasteman sector group. So daughter's idea of having a sector group for this is it's been used before to develop a national program. So that's just an example of something that I think is working, and it'd be good to get some feedback sometime from those that are using it to see whether they think it is actually working. But yeah, that's just an example, really.
Thanks, Karen. And look, so this joint behaviour change program, I guess it's got an assumption that it is about consumers, but who is it from Kaipatiki project there who's asking that question around, well, what about if this project wasn't just directed at consumers, but it was directed at the supply chain? Did you want to speak to that?
That was me. And yes, I am aware of the buyers group, and some of that is about providing some benefit to the members of the group. I think one of the things that we're considering is about having preferred suppliers that align with those values in our organisation and how we might share that with our members and volunteers to encourage their behaviour change as well. So it becomes quite a big piece of work when you we can go down lots of rabbit holes. So some collective wisdom, I guess, around that I would find beneficial.
Can I jump in just to respond a little bit? I think those are really, really good points. And what's really interesting in regards to the behaviour change, the buyers group, we've got a survey running at the moment, and we asked a question about, you know, if you were going to make decisions to be part of a buyers group, what are some of the important considerations? And actually alignment with values is coming first. So it's absolutely one of the key things. And so there is that work happening at a buyers group level, but it is the potential, I think, for this behaviour change work is at a slightly different level. So yeah, it's related, and I would really encourage anyone who wants to know more about the buyers group to get in touch with me, George, or Gareth.
Great, so there's a good link there. But I think the other thing, Karen's put a comment up, which is, look, if we were going to do this, this is probably the one that says, let's just go and do a project. This is not saying, let's just form a working group or let's just get information. This is saying, no, we've got enough experience and know-how in this network and beyond to do something. And I guess my mind goes to, just as yours did, Karen, where's the money coming from? Why would we launch this if we, this really does require a commitment, a key idea, and going for funding. Is that right? I mean, do people feel generally that we have the capacity, we've got the capacity to do something like that at the moment, if we all got our ducks in a row? Any sort of sense of comments or yeah, Gina's just said she agrees funding is the barrier, like we have to take the leap. I think I asked Daughter this question, when's the next waste management fund round opening? I think it's, was it sometime first quarter next year?
Someone else might know more, but I feel like it's already happened this year.
This year, so it would have to be next year's one. So give that as a bit of a time frame. Say we would push, we'd say, yep, let's go for a program, and let's think about how we could go for the waste management fund without stepping on everybody else's toes. So that's the sort of thing that we're talking about here. So I'll just leave the floor open for any more comments on this one. And I'm just going to,
her hand up, and I'm really keen to hear from Sue.
Yeah, let's do that.
Around that, the idea that this may be an opportunity to make the link between waste and emissions. So are you able to, yeah, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I guess the thing that I was thinking about with this is that there's with the Waste Minimisation Fund, there's an opportunity to go for a decent whack of money. The pool is growing fast, and it would be really great to be able to put in a bid for a substantial amount of money and minimize the overhead, like the admin overhead for each of the individual groups, but to be able to say, let's put in a bid for $1 million, let's share it out over 20 or 30 groups, but let's not have it so that every single group has to go through the massive burden of trying to put in a project for 50 grand or whatever it is that they might be going to put forward for it. My numbers may not add up when I'm just like saying numbers, and they may not be like the real numbers that would apply. But yeah, so the concept was that there's lots of people out there that are busy doing the groundwork. They know what works in their community. They understand how things could look. And it would be really great to be able to just minimize that kind of overhead and maximize the amount of time they have to spend doing stuff which is real in their community. I think you could come up with a project which was collective IP, but it was delivered in a way which made sense at the local scale. And I think that it would be really, the second piece I have is that within 3 years, we're going to have $250 million in the Waste Minimisation Fund. If we can get a track record now as an organisation or a collective that can deliver really great behaviour change work, then that's going to stand us in good stead as that pot builds. And one of the arguments that we're making at the national scale is that there should be a lot of money fed into behaviour change work. So we really need to get experience, collaboration, ability to be able to work together to do big projects, so that one of the ways that I think it was Billy explained it in one of the preliminary sessions is that a lot of times there's a lot of trouble. Like if you think of government as 240 volt, we're trying to plug all our little adapters into this 240 volt, machine. And it's really hard to do that. We need to get a plug board in between, which has got, multiple adapters, and you can do a USB-C and a plug and a, 12 volt. And we all need to be able to plug into something that can act as a vehicle to tap into big bucks. And that's enough from me, but that's kind of an idea. And one thing that I thought is probably not really being done at the moment that we might be able to do is the connections between waste and climate change and waste and emissions reductions, but that was just a thought. So I'll stop now.
Oh, look, brilliant stuff. And the comments are really flowing in, right from individual people all the way through to ideas around events. And a lot of yeses around the funding being the barrier. Look, what this makes me think of, Sue, is you're really saying, let's be ambitious, let's be audacious. Let's not put in a bid for 20,000, let's put in a big bid. And often I'm linking this to something that Billy said too in those pre-Zooms. He was saying really what we need is, I can't remember his exact words, but it was sort of like a laboratory or a sort of a little seedling garden, something where we can go away and experiment and actually find out what works. And, you know, when people do go for these big $1 million funds, often the first year is scoping anyway. And so, you know, so maybe actually we do know enough already to put in a bid, which is like a preliminary bid. It's like we need to create this little kind of shed out the back of our operation where we can start to really safely at the right voltage be honing our ability to use these techniques. You know, maybe that's somewhere where you're going. Look, so what I'm going to do now, just because of time, is make sure we give some airtime to the other options. So daughter, can you move us on in our slides to the next one? Improve our collective storytelling. So I'd love to hear actually too also if there's people who think this is a rubbish idea. We don't all have to be yes. It's okay to question or have a skeptic's hat on. That helps us hone these proposals. So does anybody want to say anything for or against thinking about what might it take or why it could be super awesome to improve our collective storytelling? Thanks, Karen. I'm just going to look through the various views to see if there's any hands up.
Waikarere just put her hand up.
Great. Go for it, Waikarere.
Oh, tēnā koutou, nā mihi nui, kia koutou whakarongo mai nei. Loved Michaela's presentation, thank you for that. Yeah, I guess as a storyteller and as Māori, I just sitting through this presentation this morning, I wonder too from just the influence of culture within behavioural change. I actually don't see a lot within Zero Waste Kōrero that actually speaks to my Māoritanga, and yet I wonder at other Māori whether they experience that as well. The perception is more of quite a white dominant culture, and sorry, this is not criticism, it's just my reality. You know, as one of privilege as well. You know, sort of lots of misconceptions, but in my reality, it's actually akin to how our tūpuna lived, and it's about that reconnecting back to our Māoritanga, our Māori worldview, our stories, you know, our storytelling. But, you know, one of the things I'm attempting to do is to retell them in a present context, or reframe them to, you know, where does Papatūānuku Ranginui Tangaroa Tāne Mahuta Rātou Katoa, where do they sit in current world crises, and you know, to really engage our people in this journey, you know, because it is our journey as much, you know, it's everyone's journey, but you know, it's really making a connection for my people in this space, and it's a hard one. So it's, you know, lots of translating of ideas and not translating in a word for word, you know, a literal sense, but more on a metaphorical sense. So this, you know, the storytelling here is, I think, key in terms of, returning our people to a better way, or I'm not sure it's a better way, you know, something more closer to
Ngā mihi nui Waikarere. That's just so spot on, because, you know, I guess what you're saying is that we also, first of all, need to be conscious of what the story we are telling is that we may not have meant to tell, but that's what's coming across. You know, there's all these ways of being that might not be getting across the way that we actually really want to be, and to be way more conscious of that is almost, I think I'm hearing you say, this has to be first. We could run off and do $1 million project, but if it's sort of stuck in the same old meme tropey kind of, like you say, pretty potentially inadvertently really privileged and not cognizant of our beautiful other culture, then we'd be barking up the wrong tree, to mix many metaphors.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I see it just as another, potential barrier for people.
Yeah.
Can I
Beautiful.
really quickly?
Yeah.
So I totally acknowledge that, Waikarere. That's a super good point, and not one that we're unaware of. And Jackie Forbes is not on the call today because her kura died, so she is going to join some sessions when she can. But we have been talking to Parakore in particular about this issue, and one of the things that we are going to do over the next few months is try and work more closely with Parakore to really get a Māori perspective in some of the work that we're already doing. So in particular, the submission processes that the joint submissions that we've been doing. But it would be amazing to have you involved in that project. Hannah and Liam and Sue are on the call as well, and we've been talking recently about the need for a vision, but a visual vision of what a zero waste world could look like. And I know that there's been some work happening in regards to the MFE waste strategy process, where the Ropu came up with this idea of Maui fishing up the future, and it would be amazing to have you involved in that work. So I will get in touch with you about that if that's okay.
Kia ora all. So I'm also hearing something in that about not just the vision, but the values, like coming right back fundamentally before we were to launch any big new thing around really understanding treaty-based Te Ao Māori frameworks from the values point of view. And yeah, so there's a pretty deep kōrero there. So look, again, sorry to make this a bit frustrating, but I want to leave airtime for the next one. And let's move on to that next slide just to check that we've understand what it's about and can hear some of the debate around that. Okay, this is the brand one, and we got that right, yeah. So we've got to take, remember Daughter said she doesn't even know if brand is the right word. The way I sort of read this one is it's a bit like when she gave that Parakore image that, it's got to be in your face. Like one of the reasons people say recycling took off in some areas is as soon as we got those bins out on the street, everyone could see that the behavior, was being done up and down your street, and you go, oh, I see they've got their recycling out. So those kind of visual signals are really important. So what do you think? Do we need this? Does anyone want to argue for or against? Just a few things coming in. I'm backing up Waikarere too. Thank you very much. So this brand idea, what do we think?
Can I jump in and say something? I think this is really important, and even the language around zero waste brand, because I don't know if I'm sure many of you saw last week a post from Etik on social media, and the big tagline of the post was "Zero waste is not possible. We know we've tried it." And they were basically dismissing the concept of zero waste because it's not possible, and they want to adopt the terminology of regenerative. They're now a regenerative brand, and it was really frustrating for us, and I'm sure for a lot of people who are working in zero waste, because we don't treat zero waste as a a literal thing that we achieve, and we somewhat you're now zero waste, well done, congratulations. But it's like it's the vision that we're all working towards for a better world, and so they're kind of there are these misunderstandings out there about what it is we're actually trying to achieve by using the term zero waste, and what is the concept, and what is the whakapapa of zero waste as a concept and as a movement. So I think really emphasizing the brand, or emphasizing the,
or like on the flip side, maybe like it might not be that going down the accreditation road it seems sort of almost painful, but or like trying to define too concretely what it is. But I think maybe just being aware of the fact that zero waste is appealing to people as a concept, and therefore it's rife for greenwashing, and being able to succinctly be really clear about how we can respond to these kinds of things, and maybe hold companies a bit more accountable for how they talk about these things, because ultimately, like, it's our collective mahi, and when a company goes off and sort of perpetuates misconceptions, it does make the behavior change work more difficult. So yeah, maybe it's not about accreditation, but being ready to respond or having some clear values or visions in it. So it probably goes back to the collective storytelling.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's so good to hear from you, Hannah and Liam. We always take notice of what you're saying, because you've really been such role models and being out there and listening to all the arguments and the feedback and having your finger on that pulse. It makes me think, like, is that everyone's taking zero literally, or like with many brands, I think I said to my daughter the other night, oh, could you do the hoovering? And maybe that's because we've got a little bit of an English thing. And, so that's where a case where a brand name has sort of become the verb. And, I wonder if that's a bit of a job that we need to do with all those associations around zero. We need to check in, what are people's associations around zero, and what could we do to help turn it into a verb rather than, like a literal thing. Maybe that idea is a bit lost on people, but so that's great. So we've got some pros there around, yes, it doesn't mean to say we have to create a logo, but we do have to be conscious of what the brand or the kind of reputation is that zero has, and think about whether we want to defend or adapt. Yeah. Anyone else want to say anything about that one? What would it actually mean for you?
I had one quick thought, Liana, which is zero has always been a really troubling concept for people. They get really stuck on the idea that that's the, we're going to get to zero and all that. And I think there's been a big breakthrough with zero carbon. So we've got now the story of zero carbon and what is net zero and all of that out in the world. And I think it's a really good time to push for zero waste, zero carbon, because one is about the flow of energy through the world and one is about the flow of materials through the world. And that, to me, that just makes so much sense. And I think it's a great time to go hard on it rather than to pull back. That's it from me.
Liana, you are muted again.
I'll get the hang of it eventually. I think this could also, thanks for bringing out that connection between climate and this. Just a little ad break that on Friday, folks, we've got a whole day about climate and how it might be able to connect much more of our work, and a challenge has been laid down to us. So come and join the discussion on Friday. But I guess one way of getting around the literal interpretation of zero is to come back to that whakapapa of the idea and to that storytelling and metaphorical way of looking at things. That's always way more inspiring for people, and it could be the way to bring in some of that thinking that we've already had around making this not so much just a scientific or kind of Western framed way of thinking about things. So that might be part of this as well. Now, daughter, I can't see any more hands up. Can you?
No.
No. So I think we'll just move on so we can keep to time. So we've got the last but not least.
Yes, last but not least. Is that showing?
That is, thank you. So this was the idea. It's a process one, but it's about, look, we obviously got a lot to talk about, and we could create a little bit of a centre of excellence or a working group or the shed out the back for this. Someone's already pointed out that the Wasteman has a sector group, and that there's potential to mimic or maybe even link with that. And it may even be, from what I've heard from some of the discussion, that we may not even call it behaviour change in the end. Maybe that sounds a bit manipulative, like someone's there with the strings and the puppet, but maybe we might call it hearts and mind transformation. I don't know. But this is an idea about saying we do need to get some structure. We can't do this only on 69-person Zoom calls. And so it would help focus the energy, and although it might just be a first step, it could definitely be something that we know we can commit to do. So these options are not exclusive, obviously, but just hear a little bit around working groups, whether they really worked, what people might think about this one. I'd love to hear from someone who maybe hasn't spoken yet. Is there anyone here who's actually on the Wasteman's Behaviour Change Working Group?
It's just the new one's just been announced, I feel like this morning, and Brigitte and Kahurangi are both on it. I don't know if either of them are on the call. But also Sue and Karen are making some nice comments about the structure. And I would really like to acknowledge that just because Wasteman's have got a model using volunteers doesn't mean that we couldn't look at another way of doing it. We could find some funding, or we could use the budget that we have, use different things for this, you know. So if it's really strongly thought that it needs to be paid positions, that's totally fine.
Just to answer your question, Liana, I was on the work the Wasteman's Behaviour Change Group, and it was good collaboration across local government and industry and community. And I'm now on a sort of subgroup feeding into the group. So yeah, so I've got some experience.
Yeah, so we've got some links. I mean, are there any great lessons if you think about what we could add to that, or why ours would be qualitatively much more awesome or differently awesome?
I think if we were going to set something out like this, then we need to really have that conversation about why we need two groups, and because we don't want to compete. So I think that conversation needs to be had, because Wasteman's has been doing a good job, I think. So it's not all about competition.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that, and we don't have this yet, but that could be what happens, is if there's to be a working group, we need to start out making sure that our brief, our reason for being, and that is pretty clear, so that we've got some focus. Fee's put an idea in there saying, well, maybe we should just have more influence in the Wasteman's group. Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of, so Susie, you've got your hand up. Why don't you go for it?
Kia ora. Can someone just explain what the other group's purpose is? It's just for those of us that potentially aren't in the Zero Waste Network, that would be really helpful just at this moment.
This proposed group or the Wasteman's group?
The Wasteman's group.
Oh yeah, Karen, can we come back to you on that?
It's to do collaborative, develop collaborative programs for behaviour change. Love Food, Hate Waste came out of it a long time ago.
Did some like signage also come out of that group?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So like trying to get all of the councils using the same signage and using Te Reo in the signage and stuff like that as one of their projects.
Yeah, and all the consistent colours of bins and all that came out of it as well. And I think Parakori fed into because Jackie was on it at one time as well. Fed into the translation of, so we've got Te Reo Maori signage as well, and translations.
Can I just respond to like actually Sue and Joe have both made comments about the focus of Wasteman's, and I think that is actually a really important point about the model that the Zero Waste Network, kind of especially the full members, are working around. It's got a different approach than councils and corporates, which are members of Wasteman's. So I think we have an opportunity to, you know, we can be way more kind of extreme, and that's maybe the wrong word. But, you know, we've got the opportunity to really sit in our space, which is as zero waste practitioners, people who are doing this in our lives, and the values are really aligned around around zero waste, which is slightly different from what has to happen within Wasteman's. Not that that's not important, but
yeah, I'm seeing a yes from that. Janet from Kaipatiki saying, yep, a bolder vision or a bolder community mandate would be our...
Bolder is way better than extreme.
Yeah, bolder. More out there. Camper. So So this behaviour change working group, again, you know, we are the mistresses of our own destiny. We can make this how we want if we felt that there was energy for it. I think the other thing that doesn't hurt to repeat is that in this behaviour change world, actually data and insights really count. You know, so that background research, the stuff about going out and talking and listening to people first, gathering that up and being able to put it into a framework, you know, like we saw from the PhD at the beginning, that's work that any one organisation, it would be very expensive and time consuming. And if we can sort of pull those insights, or even that kind of gathering those insights stuff, we could save a lot of money and time and effort, I guess, at that end of things, just to gather the insights to even know what does work best. You know, why do the different coloured bins work? Do they work? You know, those kinds of questions. It's almost like if we could crowdsource some of that research capacity, that might be something that came under here. Would that be consistent, daughter?
Yeah, totally. And maybe now is a good time to mention that we, in preparation this morning for this session, we decided that we would set up a follow-up session. So Izzy has created an Eventbrite RSVP process. So we're going to have another conversation in a month's time. Izzy, do you want to jump in and tell me the exact details on that one?
Yeah, the link is in the chat and it's going to be on the 20th of October at 10 a.m.
Brilliant.
So we run networking calls regularly on different things, and we're going to do one on as a follow-up to this session, which anyone is welcome to come to. I guess we could do that regularly, just kind of touching on Sue's point that we could just, you know, one of the things we could do is just get together and have a regular conversation and share what we know and come up with ideas for what we need to know more of. So that's totally within what we're already doing, and very happy to facilitate that.
Great. And so we do want to also emphasize that these 4 options, that they weren't just plucked out of the thin air, they did come out through the networks, but they're not the only 4 options. And so that Eventbrite event that's coming up in a month's time would also be a time for other proposals to come forward, and they can be considered as well. But for now, because we've just got 5 more minutes on this call, we would love to give you another little poll. So we've talked through each of those 4 options, and we'll put this poll up, and we're saying, how are you feeling about these 4 options? You can vote on one of them or all of them. Which ones do you think have got legs and that we think are worth progressing? Of course, you also might want to think about, and what would my involvement be? Why do I want this, and would I be prepared to sort of get on that bus and be the grey warbler that I mentioned at the beginning, to be working at the time when we're in that planning stage, in the spring planting stage when the grey warbler sings. So here we've got it. Here's the poll. There's 4 options. We've chatted through the pros and cons of them. You can tick the ones that you think this network would be well served to progress. There you go.
Liana, it is only a single choice.
It is a single choice. Okay, that's better, because it will force us. So what's your top favourite one? By voting for it, you're not ruling out the others, but say we only had the $1 million. Which one should we spend it on the most or the first? It's just a temperature take. We will not hold you to it, but it would be kind of interesting to hear this particular great group of 68 people who've sat through this. What's your feeling? Give us a bit of a temperature take on this. Are we ready to jump into a full program? Do we need to start with the storytelling? Do we need the brand first? Do we need the working group first? What do you think?
Janet's asked us to remind the 4 again. They are: develop a joint behaviour change program, improve two-way communication, develop a strong zero waste brand, or establish a zero waste behaviour change working group.
Yeah, and the communication one was also where we talked about storytelling, and Waikiriri challenged us around, you know, where the Te Ao Māori framework was going to sit in that. Wow, there we go. So great. We're pretty evenly split about all of them, but actually it looks like just by a nose, to use the racing analogy, you know, there's quite a big chunk of people who think that we're actually ready for action. We're ready to do a program. And probably I think, yep, coming in a close second is the brand, and working group and two-way communication also getting support, but there must be some reasons out there why those didn't come right first this time. So look, we do have this next call set up, and we'd love you also now at this point to put in the chat your name if you want to be kept in touch with this particular kōrero and kaupapa from now on. So if, for example, we were to develop a stronger brief for a working group, we've got the networking call that would always be there for anyone to come and join. But we really, if you think this is your jam, we would really love to put your name, if you would put your name in the chat. We obviously can get back to everybody on this call because we'll have your details through Eventbrite. And please forgive us if we do that, because if you've ticked the box to get more information, we'll make the most of that. Oh, look, this is fantastic. Look at all the names coming in.
I would maybe just comment, if your email is not your name, maybe put your name and email.
Yeah, if you and obviously you can do that privately to Izzy. If you don't want the whole group to see your email, you can just put it in a direct message to Izzy and she'll collect them up. Yeah,
amazing, everybody.
Awesome. I've got little shivers down my spine of all those names coming in. Look, we said at the beginning of the session that that this was just a start, you know, that we'd love to have a bus, and maybe there's a better analogy somewhere, but that we've talked about this stuff for a long time as a network. And I think the feeling is that it's ripe to really start to publicly say now that this is what we want to focus on, and why shouldn't we become expert practitioners who are honing our art of doing this? And that's the conversation that you've been part of. Would anybody like to say anything in conclusion? Thank you so much to our wonderful speaker. Thank you to all the people who learned how to put their hands up in this session. Don't forget, have a little look in that reactions box to see what other things there are to play with. I've learned a lot about how to make sure my mic turns on. Thank you for that lovely feedback, and thank you for the names.
I would love to say just thank you so much for the organisers. This was so beautifully run and I learned a lot, and yeah, I'm feeling really positive leaving this call, that we've got such an awesome community and we're going to be able to make some real change. So yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Hey, Michaela, and I think we are going to put up the link for your presentation too. I don't know whether we can do that right now in the chat before we close this call.
Oh, I can do that, but it is in the brief which was sent out with the maybe just go with that. It was in the brief that was sent out with the Eventbrite RSVP. So. Okay. So time to say goodbye. Thank you so much. Thank you from me. Thank you from Susie. Ngā mihi nui to everybody. And over and out. See you at the next session, and don't forget, see you at Friday about climate change. Yeah. Thanks, Liana. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.